Welcome, everybody, to our official Meet the Author online event with this month's author, Christina Dalcher. I have a very brief intro about the author because she's going to tell us more about herself in just a second. But she's a linguist, teacher, and writer. She's based in Norfolk, Virginia. She earned her doctorate in theoretical linguistics from Georgetown University. Her short stories and flash fiction have been published in numerous journals, but her debut novel is entitled Vox, and it was published in August 2018. And we were all very fortunate this month in March to read the book, a very timely book, I would say. Very ironic that we read this book considering what is happening in the world, which I'm sure we're going to get into. But for the moment, I will let Christina take it away.
Okay. Thank you, Erin, and thanks to everyone from Winnipeg to Lisbon to Los Angeles. And all these other places. This is really kind of amazing. It's my first time on Zoom, so have a little patience. And thanks again for being here. So I am Christina Dalcher. I did write this book called Vox, which means voice in Latin. I really love the title. I love the title probably more than the book because it's so universal. So everybody can kind of automatically know what this is. It's one title in every country that it's been published. It's the same exact title, except in Spain, this is a little known fact, they changed it to Voz, V-O-Z or V-O-Z, because Vox is an extreme right political party in Spain, and they didn't want to hamper sales by confusing my book with the manifesto of that particular political party. So why did I write this book? Well, I wrote this book because I've been writing. I think when you start writing, when you get that writing bug, it's like a drug, really, and there's a good and bad side to that. On the one hand, you keep writing, you want to keep writing. On the other hand, and you get very excited when you make that first 50 cents for a story that you sell. And trust me, I really have sold stories for something like 80 cents. But you always want to take it to the next level, and you want to do more and more. And I think once you set your mind on writing a novel, you look at the long game and you think, wow, maybe I'll actually have a book out there that hundreds of people will read, or thousands of people, or tens of thousands. I mean, we can go logarithmic here. And it's very exciting. So I was writing away. I had an idea. The timing was very interesting, and I'm sure people will ask me about this, but I'll preempt the questions by just saying this. A lot of the press, a lot of publishers have called Vox a novel for the Me Too movement, because the theme in Vox, of course, is silencing women. So one tidbit here, and there will be lots of Vox trivia coming up, I hope, is that I wrote this book before the Me Too movement ever existed, right? It just happened that my agent was selling the book the very same week that hashtag started trending. She was selling it or trying to sell it to publishers. So an interesting kind of thing happened here, because I wrote the book of the Me Too movement, but I also didn't and couldn't have possibly done it because I wrote it before that movement existed. So it's really kind of a funny thing. Anyway, that's me. I live in Norfolk, Virginia. I spend a lot of time in Europe because I love Europe, and particularly southern Spain. And some of you have met my lovely husband and life partner, Bruce, who is just wonderful, and he reads all my stuff first. And I think that's it. I'm going to shut up and let everybody else say something. Otherwise, I'll be like, silencing people.
Okay, perfect. So I had to find out how to unmute myself.
I saw that.
Val, do you want to just shoot me a message on the chat window when you have somebody raising their hand? And otherwise, I'll just work our way through the questions we received through social media and through email. So our first question was from Allie, and it was through Facebook. She wanted to know, I would love to know what happened to the neighbor's daughter who had been sent away. It felt pivotal to the story and her son's growth, but never wrapped back around.
Allie, that's a great question. And I suspect it's going to be the first of many questions that I don't have an answer to. So another bit of background here. I wrote this novel in 2 months.
Wow.
And I'm not exaggerating. I have the dates. May 23rd to July 23rd, 2017. Before May 23rd, I had a short story of 3,500 words, which was the skeleton of Vox. It was the bare idea of it. And I really liked it. There were a few excellent sci-fi mags that were looking seriously at it. I mean, we're talking pro sales, which doesn't mean anything in the context of novel writing, but for a newbie writer, a pro sale to a major sci-fi mag is wow. It's like everything is starting to happen. So I contacted my agent. I said, look, it seems the story is getting traction. People are interested in it. I think I could make it a book. And she said, well, you better hurry up, honey, because I'm going to have a baby in November. And which meant that she was not only that, but she said, if you want me to pitch this before I have a baby, I'm going to need it in September. And this was May. To get a novel to an agent, for any of you who are interested in possibly writing books, from the time you start writing a book to the time that book actually goes out into the world can be years. It usually is years because it's got to go through so much stuff. You've got to write it. You've got to read it through and look at it. You've got, and I know I will get to Allie's question, I promise. You've got to get it to your beta readers, your critique partners, your agent. Your agent has to read it. You've got to edit it again, and then it's got to be sold to a publisher. All this is to say, I wrote this bugger really, really quickly, and I left some loose ends. So what happens to Julia King, the neighbor's daughter, is yet unknown. I very much hope to, and I'm not going to say what happens to her because I don't know yet. I need to write the next book, which is not happening yet, but I'm confident that it will happen. And I'm also confident that it's going to probably fill in a lot of gaps. So sorry for the long-winded answer. I'm known for that.
No, that was perfect. I mean, those are the kind of answers we're looking for because they provide so much more background. Oh, Allison's on here and she says, awesome, thank you.
Hi, Allison.
Okay, so Candace, right into it. We'd love to know if you see any parallels between your book and what is happening in the world right now.
Well, there's no virus in my book. So, I think, so let's go back to when I wrote the book, maybe. And even before that, there did seem to be a resurgence of what is called the culture of domesticity. And I think there still is. If you ever look at some of the things that are trending about something called trad wives or traditional wives, there are, and I'm not saying anything against traditional wives. Personally, and this is a secret to all you, 45, 50, 60 people out there, I really like being kind of a homebody and stuff. But once upon a time, and it wasn't that long ago, there was a culture of domesticity in the US, in the UK, in many other countries in Europe. And what this culture of domesticity did was really revere women who were staying at home, being very submissive to their husbands, and effectively shutting the hell up. And over time, I think every time that with every movement where there was some pushback against this, every feminist movement or every, let's say, wartime involvement of women going and working in factories, once that surge ended, then there was another wave of the culture of domesticity. I think the latest that we saw was in the 1950s, which happened after all these Rosie the Riveter types were going out and working in factories while the men were away. So I noticed that there were a lot of women marching on Washington, D.C. in early 2017. And I thought about the culture of domesticity from an historical standpoint. And I also thought, wow, there's gotta be some people sitting out there, whether they're women or men or whatever, there have to be some people sitting around watching these women kind of go, hey, women power, and wishing that they would just shut the hell up. So that's one of the reasons I wrote Vox. I took a historical movement, put it into the present, gave it a resurrection in a time where I think lots of different people are trying to have their voices heard. Do I think, however, and this is very, very important, do I think that women are being pushed down and miserably treated and victimized? No, I do not. I think we're stronger than ever. I think any women, and I'm seeing, a lot of, let's say, more mature faces in this crowd right now. I think a lot of us remember the 1970s. And, we know what our older sisters or our aunts or our moms were doing and saying. So we're not in the 1970s anymore. We're way beyond that. So parallels to the real world in some respects, yes. Definitely any kind of wacko extremist viewpoint, whether it's right or left wing, is something that I think about, and it's something that I like to write about. So I think you can expect, not just in Vox, but in future books, to see me talking about extremes and not always in the same direction. I hope that helps.
Absolutely. Well, we have questions pouring in, of course. So.
Oh no. Okay, I'll be quieter. I'll be faster. I'll talk faster. I'll be like one of those auctioneer people.
Not at all. Not at all. Caitlin, who's online with us tonight, she wants to know why you chose Italy or Italian as the language and the nationality of the lover and our narrator / heroine.
Okay. So I'd like you don't have to do like the raise hand button, but you can just raise your hand by yourself, even if I can't see you. Is there anyone here? I'm assuming we're all talking about women, and obviously we're going to have straight women, and we're going to have gay women and stuff, and it doesn't matter. But is there anyone here, if you've ever fantasized about a certain type of male lover who hasn't thought maybe, ooh, Italian guy would be good? I mean, yeah, okay, I see you smiling. So even if you're not facing your hand, I'm going to do it. The fact is, I've been traveling to Italy for a very, very long time. And not the first time I went there on my own, I was 19 years old. I had met a very handsome young Italian classical pianist while traveling in Austria. And so I embarked on the study of Italian because that was the only way I could read his letters. Italians are sometimes very monolingual, especially in the 80s. And I just fell in love with Italy. I stole my passport out of my parents' door. I bought a ticket. I went there, and I sent a telegram saying, I'm coming. And ever since then I've had this like romance with Italy. And which, of course, I married a guy who's like Swiss and English, but that's another story. That's why Lorenzo is Italian, because he's sexy. Lots of people think Italian men are sexy. It's just, and it's also sort of part of me, and I am part Italian as well. So that's why.
I think that's a pretty decent answer.
Thanks.
Maria, who's also on the line right now, she wants to know. She writes, for me the most difficult scene is Jean's daughter comes home having won the contest. Later, the young guard helps the scientist because he too has a young daughter. Can you speak to the power of folks who wanted to make things right for their children versus themselves?
I'm sorry. So let me clarify. Can you help clarify this? Speak to the power of the people who wanted to make things right for their children. Specifically, we're talking about like the parents, like Jean and
Jean and I forget his name now, but the young guard that helped them out at the end.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Sergeant Petrovsky or something. I made up a name for him. I forget these things sometimes. Yeah. Well, I don't have kids, which is, and it's a very funny thing because I end up writing these novels about women who have kids. I don't know what's going on there. But I think that what I've heard is that when you do have a kid, everything changes. You become a lot, whether you're a woman or a man, I suppose, that little person is who you brought into the world is now your responsibility. I don't have that kind of relationship, but I've had dogs and cats, who I voluntarily brought into my home. And the fact is, I made this choice, right? I made this choice to have this creature who depends on me, whether it's a dog or a baby. I don't even know whether there's that much difference when you kind of ratchet up to another level of the hierarchy. When you make that choice, you're bound by it, right? It's like that Harry Potter thing that Snape did with the unbreakable vow or whatever. I mean, you've created something, or you've taken something in, some living being in, and so you now have made a promise. So I think that's part of it. And of course, as my main character understands, Jean, since she's a linguist and since she understands the absolute possibility of what might happen to a child who is denied exposure to language. And even as Sergeant Petrovsky, that young officer, I mean, he heard this story about Jeannie out in California, which is a true story, by the way, about that little girl who was socially isolated by her parents.
Right.
These people now, not only do they want to protect their children, but they have a particular reason to fight back because they know what the consequences can be.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong at all. Sorry, we have so many questions for you. I don't know which one.
It's okay. I'll try to be quicker.
No, I don't mean it from that point of view. I just want to give everybody. So we have had some emailed to us before, and I also want to ask some of those. So Ariana said she was curious what sparked the idea of women losing their voice, but I do think you've already addressed that. But the second part of her question was about using shock bracelets as punishment. So if there was any insight you could offer us on that.
There is, and remember that I'm 52, so I'm was around before the Fitbit generation. I don't have a Fitbit. I just have a regular old watch that sometimes tells time. I got the idea literally from an idea that I kept in my flash fiction trunk of concepts, things that I wanted to write about from 5.5 years ago when I started writing flash fiction, I read a story, a child's story, when I was in school. I was probably 7 years old, and I don't remember the title. I've looked for it everywhere. It's just gone. But the story was about a stranger coming into a village, and in this village, everybody had a rope around their waist and counted their words by tying a knot into the rope. And the stranger didn't understand this. I mean, everybody got up to 10 words, and he ended up complaining about things and going on a rant. So they tied all these knots into his little rope, and eventually he found out from somebody else in the kingdom that the reason the villagers did this was because by being quiet, they could hear some ethereal music coming from the sky. I know it sounds super corny, but hey, this was like the early 70s, so that's what we had. We had Dick and Jane and Spot, and we had corny children's stories. But I have never, ever, ever forgotten that idea, that concept of the word, counting the words and limiting words. And that was indeed the spark.
Thank you for that insight there, Christina. That's really great. I'm going to take over for Erin for a moment here and carry on with the next question that we've got from Joe Barber.
Absolutely.
We've seen these comparisons a lot this month. So Joe asks, was your thought process or story background for Vox influenced by Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale?
I'd read The Handmaid's Tale when it came out in 1986, which was a long, long time before I started writing Vox. And in fact, I think I wrote the short story Vox before I reread The Handmaid's Tale. And I also hadn't seen any of the Hulu stuff. I had to backtrack a year after Vox came out, or maybe just before it was coming out. I had to backtrack and binge watch all those, Hulu seasons, because somebody wanted me to write an article predicting what was going to happen in the next season. I thought, geez, Dalcher, I guess you better, get on board and watch this bugger. So I did that. So was it influenced by it? Yeah, it's hard to say. I think there are things that Margaret Atwood does that are really and truly amazing. I mean, she's so lyrical, and she's so poetic. She's a much better writer than I am. She doesn't write commercial fiction. She writes literary fiction. So I'm going to say, I think anytime you read a book and you enjoy a book, that's going to stay in your head, and you can't help but have your writing influenced by everything and anything that you read, even if it's that story about people tying ropes in their belts that I read, 45 years ago. But was I trying to ride on any coattails or be a copycat? Absolutely not. I wanted to write a thriller that was a commercial thriller. I wanted to write the kind of book people would pick up in an airport and be able to read and finish on the plane. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. I'm just playing around with that ambient noise in the background.
Oh, that's okay. I'm not here.
I am back. So the next question we have for you is very interesting, and it's actually about the heroine's relationship with her husband. And I mean, I thought it was, Rachel, you have a very good point, because she asks if you could talk a little bit about the relationship, because in a way she was surprised about the affair because she thought that they had a fairly solid relationship.
Yeah. I had an interesting question about this sometime in the past year and a half from a group of German high school students, which I found very, very interesting. And they were in an advanced English literature course. Some of them were very concerned about this affair. And what I told them, and what I think maybe a few of them understood, and what maybe the group here might understand better, because we're not in high school anymore. You know, love is a very interesting thing, and as is marriage, and relationships. I never want to dictate what people should do, but there is a sense in which maybe sometimes it is, in the best of situations, the vows that we take in marriage we take them on a particular day, at a particular time, in a particular context, at a particular age. And it is very, I don't know, it's very difficult to see what's going to happen in the future. I'm not forgiving, you know, infidelity, and I'm certainly, and you know, I know people have different views, but I also know that people grow, and people change, and people make mistakes. And sometimes I think it's very possible for individuals to love more than one person. I think we get our, you know, different people feed different needs of ours. So yeah, she had a good marriage. At the same time, I thought, when I was writing Patrick McClellan, Jean's husband, I thought that he was a very passive kind of a guy, and maybe one of the needs that he was not providing was passion. You know, he gave stability, but Jean lacked something else. I'm not apologizing for her. I'm trying to explain her. And ultimately, you know, this is, people have damned me for this, and people have thought it was very romantic. It's a very, very tricky subject, because it's a very personal subject. But I think that, I mean, look, you know, if everybody were really like 100% happy and sexually satisfied by the men in our lives or the women in our lives or whatever, I don't think there would be a market for the romance genre at all. Right? I mean, like, oh my God, why would I want to read about this strange cowboy, you know, taking me down and ripping my bodice off if I'm so bloody happy at home? But yet the romance genre is a very big seller. So maybe that sort of answers part of the question. People are smiling.
Your husband's in the background too.
He's just listening from far away.
I really liked him. I liked her husband at the end, obviously, because he really came through for her, and it seemed that he accepted the reality of their situation.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's, you know, sometimes I think, I went to a talk a very long time ago about romantic love, and the speaker said, I just met my husband and I wasn't married to him yet, and the speaker was talking about, look, I love you now. I cannot promise that I will love you forever, because things will change. And this is, you know, for us, I think, with our concept of the institution of marriage, this is almost anathema, right? You know, how can anybody believe that you could break such an unbreakable vow? And here I go back to Snape again. But the fact is, and I turned to Bruce and I said, what? What do you mean you might love me now, but you might not love me in 10 years? What the hell is that? And he said, well, the best I can say is I love you now. And the older I've gotten, and the more I've thought about it, and the more I've seen, you know, of the world, I think that as human beings, now is sometimes the best we can do, in some ways. Sorry, I got philosophical there.
Deborah, who's also online right now, she wants to know if there was a personal event in your life that inspired this book.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was, when my husband attached that, electric shock inducing bracelet to me and said, "Down, bitch, you only get 100 words a day." I mean, for anybody just joining.
Yeah, no kidding.
I'm sorry. A personal, no, there really wasn't. There really wasn't. I other than the fact that I've been reading Stephen King for the better part of 4 decades, and I love to write scary, shocking, provocative stuff. And I want to get people to think about things like, extremism. And of course, I love linguistics. So the idea of writing a commercial thriller with an element of language science in it was super appealing. But no, there was nothing, except for maybe some of the sex scenes. Okay, I might have drawn them from real life, maybe. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Okay, good to know.
I said might.
Might, right, sorry. Kind of going for a little bit further, Jennifer asks if there is any characters in the book based on either people in your life or any public figures.
Yeah, well, I made a big mistake with identifying the current president as as very Trump-like, I think, because what you want to do when you write a book, what I want to do when I write a book, is I want it to be timeless. I don't want it to be tied to a particular era or particular year. One of the reasons, and is because it's just too much damned work to fit in all these details about verisimilitude and what highways are called now and what and everything else, or airports which seem to change names every time a former president dies. So I try to leave those details out because it's easier, and I think it makes the novel more timeless. So I think that was an error, because the fact is, this president could have been any president. He could have been any lame duck president who had a very powerful, let's say, Jerry Falwell or Billy Graham type, who in fact had more power than the president. I mean, the thing about Vox is the president is a complete lame duck, right? He doesn't have any power at all. The person with the power is Reverend Carl. And we're not really seeing that now. And I didn't have a particular Reverend Carl model in mind. He could just be an amalgam of, of anybody who was crying out like that. As for other people, no, I think every time I write, there are, again, it's like the personal experiences. I think every time any of us writes anything, we cannot help. I can't emphasize this enough. We're powerless to prevent all of the life experiences that we have and all of those things firing around in our brains from influencing what we're writing. So necessarily, there are going to be parts and pieces of people who are there, but they're not always particular people, if that helps.
No, absolutely. So you touched on this question a little bit already. This is from Elizabeth, who's also online. But she wants to know, you talked about the Me Too movement. How much of the views, perspectives, concerns raised in the book are actually held by you personally, and how much is just creative license?
How much of the views and perspectives about what?
So the views, perspective, concerns about what's happening in the book are actually something that you fear could one day come to fruition.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, like I said, I think really I think the younger generation of women is going to hate me for this. I think anybody who was around in the, the 60s or 70s is maybe going to be a little bit more agreeable. I think we're okay. I don't think we're ever going to have wrist bracelets slapped on us and be shut up. I think we're too strong for that. I think a lot of our, a lot of the women who came even before us have done the hard work. So this was, much more me wanting to write a thriller. And I'll tell you what, the one thing that if you want to hear one thing that I really regret, I regret not making Reverend Carl Reverend Carla, because I think that would have kind of changed the whole dynamics and the way people think about this as, patriarchal suppression. The fact is that when I started investigating the culture of domesticity, I found a very interesting movement called the True Woman Movement. And in fact, originally, the pure movement in Vox was the true movement. We had to change that because there's a current true movement, and it is women run. And a lot of those biblical phrases that at one point Jean has to recite into her new-fangled wrist counter, these sort of mantras about, obeying her husband and, God being here and man being here and woman being down somewhere at the bottom. Those are all in the manifesto of the True Woman movement that's going on now. So kind of unbelievable, but true.
I think that Reverend Carla would have completely changed the book.
I think it would have maybe enabled people to focus more on an extreme way of thinking that is embraced not just by men but also by women, and maybe drawn back a little bit from the the hateful patriarchy and toxic masculinity and stuff. Because as we see, I mean, that's actually there in the book. I mean, there are women who are embracing this, right?
Yeah.
So again, I like to be in the middle of things, and I like to basically play with the people who are on one side or the other and say, well, what if we took your way of thinking and pushed it a little bit more toward the right? Or what if we took your way of thinking and pushed it a little bit more toward the left? What might happen then? I mean, so everybody's sort of fair game.
I just wonder, in your experience, this is just me asking, but in your experience of doing your book tour or doing book signings, have you come across a lot of readers that just would have expected you to be like a big feminist and like all about the Me Too movement? And yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. People get really, really freaked out when I show up in a cute dress and pearls. I mean, they're like, they want me to like, I don't know what they're expecting, but they're not expecting someone who, goes and gets her hair done or, takes time off writing and, knits baby clothes or something like that. I mean, but hey, we're all different people, right? It's been very, very enlightening to see how shocked people are when I come out and say things like, gee, maybe it's okay that the Woody Allen book is published. And, that bugs people. If I may say so, it bugs the shit out of people because they find this conflict. And I think conflict is what it's all about, right? It's not about Woody Allen or it's not about Me Too or anything. It's about, I think we're in a point in our world, in our society, where there's only one side or the other. And it's very difficult to, I don't know, to kind of rationalize or to process someone who appears to be a proponent of different ways of thinking that aren't always predictable. But that's who I am.
Well, yeah, I can see that they'd have clear expectations of who the author of this book is and expect you to behave as so.
They do. And you know what? I don't.
Okay, so we have a question here, which is very specific, so I'm just going to read it word for word. It's from Lenore.
Okay.
She says, when Jean and Patrick are teaching their daughter to speak less after the word limit is in place, they use positive reinforcement to counter the effect of the shocks from the bracelet. They give her treats as a reward for speaking less. Do you think that the positive reinforcement was more effective than the shocks?
Oh, I mean, what more, you know, maybe, but how awful is that, right? I mean, can you just imagine, can you imagine giving your daughter or your son or anybody treats for doing something that is just perpetuating some kind of evil? It was, oh, what a horrible thing that I wrote. Oh my God, sorry. But hey, that's why it's a thriller.
Okay, so Deborah has a question here. She says, regarding the end of the book, it seemed that getting rid of the Reverend solved the problem. However, weren't there other followers? How did getting rid of Reverend end the bracelet movement? Did someone powerful take over with a different view? Maybe this is best left for your next book.
Well, it might be. It might be. I mean, as I understand it, and look, I'm the first person to say that yes, this was a little, the ending was a little fuzzy. I accept that. I apologize for it, but I was in a real hurry. And also, once the book was sold, the publishers really wanted to get it out quickly too. So everything was rushed. I mean, this was not a regular kind of book publication cycle. I think that, yeah, I think that that's often what happens when one person is taken down, another rises in his place. I mean, you know, that certainly seemed to happen with the czars in, you know, Russia and the subsequent, you know, Marxist and Leninist and Stalinist movements. I mean, you got to, sometimes the devil that you know is the devil that you is better than the devil that you don't know, right? Mm-hmm. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. I think, you know, I think for the time being, the risk counters are off, and if I write anything subsequently that follows on to Vox, I may, not committing to it, I may be exploring what I would call an equal and opposite reaction.
Well, that'll make you all wonder about the next book. Now, we know you've published, good question, Jen. Jen just has asked about Masterclass, which is coming out very, very soon.
I saw that. Bruce, can you bring me the book, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, what would you like to know?
So maybe just, can you give us a little synopsis and whet our appetite?
I hope I can. I mean, I know I can do one. I hope I can do the other. So,
the book bringer.
This is what, thank you, book bringer. This is what the book looks like. There's a woman at a desk. And again, this is near future dystopian fiction. I can't really even call it science fiction, because there's it's not hard science fiction, at least. What God is a world where everybody has a number assigned to them, a Q score. And in fact, the original title of this book was Q, just the letter Q. They thought that was weird, so they changed it to actual words instead of just one letter. So in this world, everybody is defined by a Q. Kids are defined by a Q. It depends how much money you make, whether both parents are working, where you live, what your, past SAT scores were, or A-level scores, or whatever marks. Then and kids are kids and teachers alike are constantly assessed, relentlessly assessed. There are 3 tiers of schools. There's the elite silver school. There's the not so bad, pretty good green school. And then there's the yellow school. And if a kid fails a test, I think they're delivered monthly, it is quite, and if that Q score falls below an arbitrarily high value, the yellow bus comes around. I promise when you read this book, you are never going to be able to look at a yellow school bus the same way. I can't. I see yellow buses. I'm like, no, go away. Go, get thee away, Satan. So the fact is I wrote this book because I wanted to resurrect another historical movement, one that was far, far worse than the culture of domesticity, which required women to be pious and submissive and domestic and all that other lovely stuff. I wanted to talk about what would happen if we resurrected the American eugenics movement from the early 20th century. And I don't know, how many people, can I get a physical show of hands just for how many people are familiar with the American eugenics movement? Okay, good. That's 3. I can count 3. That was me. I started researching this. Hey, somebody wrote a paper on it a while ago. Awesome, Caitlin. This is something that doesn't seem to be known. I mean, I certainly didn't learn about it when I was studying American history in grammar school or in high school. And every time I mention a little tidbit about it to my friends or my neighbors or other writers, they go, "What? That couldn't possibly, happen." But the fact was, it did happen. We were putting people in institutions. The Supreme Court, Oliver Wendell Holmes, the Chief Justice, he was the Chief Justice, right? Yeah. No, he was not the Chief Justice, sorry. He was on the Supreme Court. Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. during the Buck v. Bell case in 1927 actually said, and I quote, "3 generations of imbeciles are enough," and paved the way for states to rampantly sterilize individuals on an involuntary basis. I find this to be sort of true horror, and I wanted to write a book about it that is accessible commercial fiction about a woman who loses her daughter to one of these state schools. She's got a daughter who's all tense and anxious. The daughter bombs a test, and she's off on that yellow bus to some remote place. So again, we've got a relationship with a mother and daughter. We've got a situation where the question is asked, what would you do in order to save your child when you find out about what's really going on? And I hope that without being preachy, it gives people something to kind of thrill them and scare them, while also giving readers something to think about and maybe something to even look back about. And I just saw briefly on the chat that somebody took a course about eugenics and had studied it, wrote a paper on it, but also never learned about the American eugenics movement, which happened before all that bad stuff in Germany, by the way. We paved the way. So I'm really excited about this book because, again, it's a commercial thriller. It's scary, but it shows us a side of ourselves that I think we pretended didn't happen, and Americans have a right to know about this.
So 2 important questions on Masterclass. When does it come out?
It comes out on April 21.
Okay, so we don't have to wait too long.
You do not have to wait too long. The live book launches, unfortunately, have been canceled due to this thing. I can't even say the word anymore, right? But we're hoping to do some virtual things, and I, of course, would be very happy and honored to, be back and talk about it with all of you lovely girly book club people. So just let me know.
And my second question is...
one thing. I'm sorry. May I interrupt?
Of course.
I'm sorry. One thing. Babu, can you bring me the Q one too, please? Thank you. I know that there are people chiming in from other countries, okay? So this is the US and Canada model. It's not quite finished, but it's the basic look. This is the UK model, which is coming out at the end of April. And there are other countries who bought this book when they bought Vox. So Germany, Italy, the Arab Culture Center in, I think, Casablanca, Brazil, Spain, France. And we expect that there will be more foreign sales. So if you're not in the US, feel free to look for Q in the UK and Commonwealth, or hang on and see about the foreign publishers who are going to, have the translation.
And you can always search for her name if you're having trouble.
Exactly.
My other question about Masterclass specifically, or Q, was did you have more time to write it?
Yes. Yes, I did. And I think because of that, I personally like the book better. As a writer, I like the book better. And as a reader, even though it's very, very difficult for me to go back and read my own stuff, because after a while, you want to, I don't have to worry about running out of toilet paper. I've got so many copies of my own damn book that, I'm like, fine, whatever. You get really tired of reading that stuff. But I will say that from the writing and the reading standpoint, and also because I took more time to write it, it went through many more evolutions of editing, and I did a lot more research as well. And I don't think there was a publication rush either. So all of these factors came together, and I think it made it a better book. Does it mean I'm not going to get 1-star reviews? No. There's always some crank out there who wants to give 1-star reviews. Who cares? I mean, write your own damn book. Anyway. Sorry. Hey, I've been to book clubs. I've been to live in-person book clubs where people have actually said, I hated your book. It was terrible. And I mean, to my face. So, you grow thick skin and you get to be a little bit cranky, but hopefully I'm cranky in a gentle, funny, tender kind of a way.
Oh my goodness, you've been amazing. Thank you so much for taking this time to speak to us. We have one last question for you.
Sure.
On just to end our chat with you, we'd love to know your favorite authors. It's clear that you like a very specific genre when you're writing, but what do you read?
I love Stephen King. I love Stephen King. I'm seeing thumbs ups all over the place. If I see any groans, that's okay. I forgive you. You just haven't read him yet. You're in for a treat. I've been reading Stephen King ever since I think I sneaked Salem's Lot off of my off of my older uncle's bookshelf and devoured it. I also grew up on vampire movies, those Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing vampire movies, you know, the old Hammer films, because my mother was a kind of a movie whore, and I mean that in the nicest way, Mom. But she also let me watch this stuff, right? I mean, she's like, yeah, hey, 7-year-old kid, yeah, watch a vampire movie. Good on ya. So I love to be scared. I think that fear makes the world look a lot less scary. I mean, fictional fear anyway. The downside is that I often do look over my shoulder at night when I get up out of bed and walk down the hall. But at 52, that's not something to be really proud of. But yes, I love Stephen King. I also really like, I've been reading so many new novels now, debuts, that I have to blurb and stuff. But I adore Mark Helprin. I adore his short stories. I think they're some of the most beautiful stories I've ever read. I was first exposed to him when I was 14 years old. So if you can pick up a copy of Mark Helprin's collection, A Dove of the East, then maybe you'll know what I'm talking about. And somebody just quickly asked what my favorite King novel is. Man, I might have to go, there are so many, but I might have to go with The Shining in combination of Dr. Sleep, because that rich character arc over time and the redemption and it's horror, but it's beautiful. So there we are. I also really love Ira Levin. And Ira Levin's Stepford Wives was a big influencer when I was writing Vox. Not the new Stepford Wives, not that funny comedy cutie one. I mean the old one, the original Stepford Wives. Don't watch the new one. Never watch remakes. Anyway, anything else?
No, that is it. But thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you for writing such a wonderful novel that created so much wonderful discussion in all of our online meetings this month. And I mean, we didn't get to meet in person this month, which was sad, but we did meet online, and we also met in our social channels, and there was so much discussion about your book. I think it was such a great choice, considering we weren't able to meet in person, but people still wanted to connect so badly over it.
I'm really, really glad. And, I will be doing some giveaways once Masterclass or /Q comes out. I'm probably still going to be doing some giveaways for Vox. You obviously already have it. You can, if you win one, you could, I don't know, use it in a variety of ways. But I don't know if you have a heavy presence on Twitter, but I am on Twitter, and that's probably my primary social media channel right now. So especially for giveaways. So if anybody's interested, please have a look at, you don't even have to follow me if you don't want to do that. Just have a look at what's going on. There are other giveaways going on right now. There are a lot of other authors like Philippa East and Louise Candlish, who are doing, NJ Krosky, I think, David Bell, I believe, who are doing giveaways under the hashtag ReadCooperate. It's like recuperate, but with an extra little AD there. So have a look, and I'm sure we'll be in touch. And thank you so much again. I'm just delighted to be here. You made a kind of a day so much better.
Thank you, Christina. We look forward to seeing what's coming next.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.